Well, we might as well go ahead and get started. So, and people will join in. I thank you guys for kicking in on this. This was a really last minute, but I feel like there is a need for a lot of people to figure out how to work remotely in particularly in GP. So we could focus on GP because the GP people are our peeps. And so I thought if we each just present a little quick something in like a 10-minute round rapid pace, we'd have room at the end for a lot of Q&As. I'll probably have a lot of Qs myself from each one of you, but we could share this with GP users across the board. And we're going to post this video on at least my YouTube. I don't know if you, the other three of you, well, and our special guest who we'll talk about later, if you guys would like to post it on your YouTube as well, that's perfectly fine with me. I'll be happy to share that information with you. And so, so this is just for ideas, options, and Q&A. So it's real casual, everyone. So feel free to enter in a chat question if you have one now or at any given point in time. So this is not a sponsor session. I know I do have two ISVs on the panel, but we are not trying to sell you anything. We are simply trying to help guide you on ways that you can learn to work remotely, because we're kind of being forced into it now. I have these funny, I think they're funny little memes from quarantining. I love this one. Good morning. Now what? I mean, this is just like our whole house. But again, we're going to do some rapid sessions, and I am covering up Mr. Zubin's. Let me move everybody out for a moment. This is our rapid session panel. We're going to start with Mr. Gomez, Mariano Gomez, MVP extraordinaire, and actually all of us are MVP All-Stars. That's pretty cool. And then myself, MsBelindaAllen. I'm going to do 10 minutes on what I think you should be paying attention to. Whoops, I went backwards. Then we have the beautiful Miss Amber Bell, who is going to also share some additional information with us. And then Mr. Gidwani, Zubin Gidwani, also has some cool Azure stuff he wants to talk to us about. So actually from us guys, if you have a question for another person of the panel, if we could just wait till the end. We don't have to take up our whole 10 minutes, but I don't want anyone to lose a minute of their time as we go through. So I love Rosanna Dana. I don't know if I'm aging myself, I know, but from Saturday Night Live, the famous Gilda Radner character who always said it's always something. And this is true. There is always a need for us to have to work remotely, whether it's hurricanes or floods or earthquakes or terrorist attacks or illnesses, there's always a need. I was in New York on 9/11, and there were, we opened up our office to a GP user and let them one of their departments work out of our office, and they weren't even our customer. We reached out to some other partners and said, hey, we have some office space. Who of your customers need some? I mean, and because they physically didn't have an office anymore. They also physically didn't have a computer anymore, and they physically didn't have a server anymore. So that was quite the big deal. I was also there during Hurricane Sandy, and I think, Amber, you were in Connecticut during Hurricane Sandy, right?
Yes, yeah.
Yep. So the whole southern tip of Manhattan was underwater for a while, and many GP users, again, were displaced. And those kinds of things from hurricanes and floods and earthquakes can happen anywhere. So you really need to be prepared. It's interesting now, having left New York City and moved out, I'm becoming painfully aware of how many companies were not or are not prepared for having to work remotely. I mean, because after 9/11, all of our customers went in and created, and we helped them create disaster recovery programs and figure out how to work within. So that's what this is about. So us to share ideas with you, share some options with you, and things to think about. And Mariana, this is your meme. You're going to be speaking first, and I thought this one represented you quite beautifully. The Corona beer.
Yep.
Quarantined from.
That's awesome.
So
I don't know what everyone will be thinking about me, but yeah, that's fine. Share desktop. Okay. All right. Awesome. Cool. So the first thing I want to present, can you guys see my screen okay? Let me know what you're seeing.
Yep.
You see my Power Up screen?
You see Power Apps.
Okay,
Yeah,
awesome. So that's perfect. So that's where I'm going to start, right? What I really want to talk about today is using the Power Platform as an entry point to Dynamics GP. When we work remotely, typically we are conditioned to think, you know, it has to be RDS or it has to be, you know, some sort of mechanism that allows me to remote into a server and gain control of my Dynamics GP application that way. Well, typically, if you think about how your work stream happens and the different aspects of your work stream, you will find yourself working on one or two particular things on a daily basis. So in reality, you know, visiting the entire application is not something that you do on a daily basis. Simple example, if you're an AP clerk, you probably enter vouchers, you probably do some vendor maintenance. If you're an AR clerk, probably the same thing on the customer side, you enter a few vouchers, you probably do some customer maintenance. So you know, for those that work on the field and you actually at a customer site, you probably have to enter timesheets. So there's a number of things that you do, but they don't encompass the entire application functionality. So why not break down those pieces of functionality into manageable components that you can then use to leverage with the Power Platform? And I have a simple set of examples here. Internally, for example, here at McCorma, we use this timesheet application. I remember this one very vividly because Belinda and I sat down on a, what was that, Belinda?
Thanksgiving.
On a Thanksgiving weekend of all weekends, right? And I said, you know, there's got to be a better way for us to handle our timesheets internally. When in less than an hour and a half, I actually had a fully working application based on a template that exists on the Power Apps portal. And it was pretty simple to get this up and going, where I can actually add a specific timesheet. You know, it basically allows you to select an approver, not that I should be approving my own timesheets, but you guys get the point. And it does allow me to select a cost center and create that timesheet header. Then I can go ahead and start adding line items based on the different categories of work stream that we have. So for example, if it's consulting, whether it's a custom development, you know, the type of work that we do internally, I'll add a project number to it, right? So let's say this is project 1 and enter a, you know, how many hours I spent on it. Very simple example on how you can basically leverage the Power Platform to do this type of work. And when I hit submit here, yeah, my data store is a SharePoint repository, but that could have well been submitted to a Power Automate flow that takes it to Dynamics GP using the eConnect stored procedures, for example. Now, that's one example. The second example is a simple customer list. How many of you, I can't think of anybody that doesn't deal with a customer list or that deal with some piece of customer information within an organization. So, you know, very simple customer list as well, built with Power Apps. You know, it presents some basic information in the front. If you want to dive down a little bit, it even gives you the customer balance, you know, payment terms, last payment, you know, payment amount, and it gives you an approximate, you know, location of where the customer is. Now, if I actually want to get fancy and I want to incorporate Google Routes into this, then I can get, you know, a simple map that shows me what it would take for me to navigate from Atlanta, Georgia, all the way to Seattle, Washington, where this customer is located. Right, so this is Aaron Fitz Electrical. So as you can tell, I am definitely pulling data from Dynamics GP, and is showing that relevant information. So again, just another example with email incorporated. So if I actually want to type something like see you for lunch, that would definitely send out a message all incorporated into my device where I can see this very effectively and operate with that data very simply. Now, obviously, for this demonstration, I'm running everything in a browser. But if you can picture this running on a phone, and let me see if I get fancy here and can do that. You will see that that I'm also doing some of that work on my mobile device. So let's see, and I don't want to take obviously the. Yep, I'm getting there.
Oh, okay.
I'm getting there. I'm getting there.
Sorry, I got excited.
I know you are. So this is my mobile device, and as you can see, if I actually have to be on the run like most of us nowadays, obviously we have Facebook up and running all the time, but that's just me. That's the social animal in me. But if I actually have power-ups on my device, I can have access to those same applications if they're being shared with me. So here's my timesheet report. I started that timesheet report on this session over here. So let me just close this out so you can see how that particular one operates on my device. But I can pick up my work basically on my mobile device wherever I am and get going from there. So let me just open this right here. And then here we are. So this is the timesheet I was working on. So I'm on the go. I can always go back and add more information to that timesheet. So, perfect example of how you can leverage the Power Platform to go mobile as well. Now, the other thing is I have that same sales contact application here, which I'm opening. All I need to do is give it access to my location because obviously Google Routes function based on location. But I can also take that list along with me if I have to actually go on the road. Not that anybody should be going on the road right now. Please don't get that impression from what I'm telling you. But if I needed to get a route map for this customer, I can also have it incorporated on my device, again with information from Dynamics GP. And the final example I want to show you is something that I presented, a couple of years back in a conference in Fargo, North Dakota. I know I didn't get too many kudos for this one, but Belinda did kick my butt on that, shootout. But if you go back and look at the simplicity, most customers that I know have the simplicity of GP's batch approvals right under inside of GP, and all they do is they need that little check mark unchecked, will enter a password. You could do this simply from your device as well if you did set up some Power Apps and Power Automate around it. So if I look at this GL batch and I want to see the details of every single journal or of the journal that makes up that batch, I could actually do that from my device and approve when I'm done. So I have the capability of approving that particular batch from here, which will then go fire off Power Automate and update Dynamics GP accordingly. So again, three simple examples of how you can definitely operate and use Dynamics GP remotely. And last but not least, if you have, and I know somebody else will probably touch on this, but if you have the web client, that's another way to go mobile. It's another way to effectively work remotely. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this because I think I read this on somebody else's document, but it's a good way to also deploy the application and consume it in a browser or on your mobile device very effectively. So that's what I had for today. Thank you very much.
That is brilliant. And I love that you included that one piece because of the batch approval, because that was an idea I essentially then ended up stealing from you. There we go. You guys see the little Debbie?
Yes.
Okay, so obviously that's
Hey,
me.
I resemble that.
Okay, sorry guys about the awkwardness, but I haven't used this tool in a while, so. Okay, so there's a couple things I want to talk about, and one of them that I want to talk about is ISV options. There are some ISV cloud options for very specific roles, and some of those include Salesforce, P&3, which is one of my favorite document imaging pieces because for payables, because it's workflow with document imaging, and it's all web-based, completely web-based, and then communicates. And then, Mariana, you guys have a payment method for McCorma, right, where you can pay, people can use your service to pay their bills?
Yeah, so we are actually doing some work with one of the prominent partners in the market right now, actually very well known in the Dynamics GP space. And our intent is to have something ready by the end of May. We actually had a relationship before, and you know, that customer or that partner got bought out by another company, and that was the end of our relationship. So,
Got it.
but yeah, we're supposed to be back in business at the end of May with something around electronic payments. Yep.
Okay, cool. And that's something that you should be thinking about, is the fact that there are some ISV cloud options that are very, very role specific, and for that you should probably talk to your partner. They're probably working from home just the same, but they're still working, so talk to them to see if there are any kind of role specific ISV products that are going to give you that kind of capability. And then of course I too, like Mariano, am a lover of all things Power Platform, and that would include Power BI, Power Apps, and Power Automate. And
don't discard Power Virtual Agents.
Yeah, true. Power Virtual Agents, true. But I haven't done much work with that, and I almost put it down there, Mariano, but then I started thinking about it's a little more complex when you try to connect it to a SQL server. So, which, dumb me, that was the first thing that I did. So it was a bit of, you know, it was like, you know, learning, it's like sending your child to first grade and expecting them to take calculus. That's kind of what I did. So, but yes, that is definitely one of the options. And I did mention that I flat out stole your demonstration, and I'm going to show it in a little bit different method. Mariano gave you the demo of the product, and I'm going to talk about how it works and how it can flow. And I'm going to talk specifically about AP invoices, because if you have AP invoice approval, a very, very simple way that you could get some remote working done is via Power Platform. So invoices are entered into GP. We'll talk about how they get into GP shortly. And then somebody else reviews the batches by looking at them in Power BI. And then through the use of Power Apps, just like Mariano showed you, he just showed you the invoice information directly in AP or directly in Power Apps, but they can approve it in Power Apps. And through the use of the approval process that is in GP, if you just mark batch approval, then all you have to do literally is change one field from 0 to 1 and put a date in another field and who approves it in a third, and that's it. And then you could approve any batch. And you could even add in Power Automate by having it send emails out to the AP department that the batch has been approved or even rejected for that matter. So there's a lot of things that you could do inside a Power Platform that affect the data right in the SQL Server database, and it could all be done remotely. And even though I was very stern with the whole panel, like we can't sell anything, but Mariano and I do a Power Platform share, and we happen to be doing one this Thursday. And our special guest is Reza Durrani, who is a MVP in at least one, if not 2 or 3 of the Power Platform groups. So Reza's going to be sharing some of those things with us, and it's you could find it on my YouTube channel. But let's talk about how we can connect to our desk that's in the office where we know we have GP connected. these are some of the more common methods of working, and Mariana mentioned the web client, but I want to focus on the top two because you may not have the web client deployed in your organization. So a lot of people use things like TeamViewer and go to My PC, and these aren't the only options. But there are a couple of things that you want to ensure that you have on this. First of all, your machine's on. So is it secure? I mean, do you have it where it's protected, where somebody in the office, they can't get to it because you might have payroll information on it? What happens if you need to reboot your machine, or if you need to do any kind of maintenance on your machine? Are you going to be able to get back into TeamViewer or PC, go to My PC or PC Anywhere? I think maybe it's PC Anywhere. Maybe that's a different one. But anyhow, regardless, are you going to be able to get to those? But those are good, quick options if you just need to occasionally work remote from your machine. But for a long-term scenario, like we're facing right now, that's probably not one of the better options, in my opinion. And then you could also do some self-hosting, and there's a couple options for self-hosting. You can go to a hosting center, which is typically something that looks like a big warehouse or a big bunker, and you get a cage, literally a cage, a fenced-in cage, and you could put in your own machines and host. And then there's also hosting to some kind of software or infrastructure as a service like Azure, and Zubin will be talking a little bit more about Azure right after me. These are some other options, and I've made some notes on some of the pros and cons of these. So the nice thing is you have full control over everything, just like you do when it's in your office. And you could control which, what pieces of software you're using. You can keep it limited, and you basically, it's more of a control thing. But there are a couple things you need to take into consideration, such as management costs. And what happens if their company, or wherever you have it hosted, if it's a physical warehouse, if they encounter an earthquake or a flood or whatever the case may be? What happens if they have a power outage? What are you going to be able to do then? Are you going to have to go back in and fix it then? And so what's going to happen there? And then what happens to the space limitations as you grow? You're going to have to go and get different machines. And I would say you really probably need to be looking at upgrading your server every 5 years anyhow, and you need to buy the biggest and best. So you're still going to have that kind of hardware infrastructure as you go along. And pretty much the same is true with Azure. If you host with something like Azure, you still have full control over it. You're going to have to go to a virtual machine. And even then you have some other additional issues. What about the guaranteed uptime for Azure? I know they brag about a lot of it, but you really need to read the fine print to make sure you have the right kind of servers in place and the right number of servers in place. So you want to be very, very careful about that. And then there are hosting provider options. So there's some generic hosting where you can just go anywhere that has hard disk space that you can go to, and Azure kind of falls into that land. There are a couple of really excellent GP-specific hosting products. So I used to work with one of them. All of them are really very, very good. And then your partner also might provide hosting as well. And so these are some options that you have here. So we've got, again, some upsides and downsides to here. Typically, there's no acquisition cost, so you don't have to worry about buying new computers. You might have to pay a setup fee, but you don't have to buy new computers. And they're really inexpensive overall. And so instead of having to buy all the hardware and have the physical space, as you would if you self-hosted in one of the warehouses, you're only paying that monthly fee. So that's good. You do have some extra security options, and my 10 minutes just went off, but I'm going to just wrap this up real fast. A couple things you need to think about is what happens if they end up going out of business, particularly like the generic hosting, or they get bought out by somebody else. What might happen to you then? What if you stop using GP? If you're on a subscription license, and you could do that with much easier with the GP hosting and the partner hosting one, the GP specific hosting, and you're just paying a monthly fee as opposed to paying that annual enhancement plan, which is a great option if your plan has lapsed, because you could go from a lapsed enhancement plan to subscription pricing without having to pay that penalty fee. But you need to be careful and talk to them about what happens if I quit using GP or I want to move to another product. You need to talk to them about the data. And you also need to talk to them about not so much partner hosting, but the generic hosting and the GP hosting. Make sure that they are certified and audit compliant, that they go through annual audits to make sure that your data is indeed protected. And then finally, I want to talk about disaster recovery. You need to make sure you have a good disaster recovery plan in place. If we go back to my story I shared at the beginning about businesses in 9/11, I mean, they had to go to disaster recovery because their servers that were in the World Trade Centers were just vaporized. So they had to go to disaster recovery plan. So make sure that you have a good disaster recovery experience there. No, I do also want to go, let me go back one more time on this. I want to talk about viruses as well. This is quite the big deal when you have viruses for hosting and even ransomware. You're better off dealing with a hosting provider trying to fix that than you trying to fix it yourself. And so I know that there was one big hosting company that was hit with a ransomware a year ago, and I still am absolutely 100% convinced that the customers who were using them were better off than the ones who weren't, because I helped a customer get through it who got hit with ransomware, and it was a nightmare. So you are significantly better off letting that responsibility fall onto somebody else. I just can't stress that enough. So that's quite the big deal. So that's all of it for me. I just wanted to talk about those kinds of things that you could think through. If you come up with questions in the interim, you could bring them up during the chat. And then after that, I'm going to pass it on to you, Mr. Gidwani. So let me find my little user list. Whoop, went too fast. And there we go. Screen sharing. There we go. Are you there, Zubin? 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 Oh, hang on. There you go. You're there? Hello?
He looks frozen to me. He's kind of like, do you see the little circle?
That's funny. Yeah, he might be. Well, you know what, Amber?
Yeah.
We will go on to you. So everybody, I'm going to introduce the lovely Miss Amber Bell. If I can get, oh, thank you, Amber, for making it easy on me. There you go. We see you.
Okay, good. Okay, well, hello, everybody. Just got to jump ahead. Let me just see if I can click OK. And can you guys see my screen?
We can.
Okay, good. Woohoo, I did it. I was faster, too. So, so today I just wanted to talk about a couple of things about lessons that we can learn when this kind of thing happens. It's unfortunate. It's stressful. We're all doing the best we can. We just need to be patient with one another, definitely. But just wanted to give you kind of a backup about or an idea of what you can do. So I'm on LinkedIn and all those kind of things. If you want to know my background, you can always check me out there, or my website is here. So basically, a couple things is when you're talking about the processes and things that are going on in your system, my specialty is I do a lot of documentation, I write manuals, I do a lot of presentations, and I also work with companies to help them really document their processes and things like that. And that usually works really well when things are calm, but right now everything is really stressful. So when things are going on right now, you need to kind of track who's having a problem, what kind of critical processes are a problem right now. Make sure that you know all of those critical processes. So if you don't know that something's a problem, when you go back to the office when things open up, you might not realize that you've missed something. So those definitely are critical processes that you want to make and track. Are there deadlines for those processes? Are there deadlines for filing things like your taxes, things like that? And if only one person knows how to do that, and they're, out of the, they're not able to connect, or, worst case scenario, things are happening all the time right now. So if they're the only one that knows how to do that, we want to make sure you document that and that you're not caught in that situation. So you want to know who is doing those critical processes, what those critical processes are, when those need to be done, and are there other agencies or customers or vendors or other people involved in that process. So if you have to contact someone to get that information, how you contact them. The other thing is if you don't have a way to securely share passwords, that's something that you can find out. I'm actually looking forward to anybody in the panel saying what they use to share passwords securely, or do they just have a post on the bottom of their computer that they pass around. But in this kind of situation, obviously we want ways to share that critical information. We wouldn't want it to be with just one person if that's something important to do. One thing that I want to do now, or wanted you guys to do, is right now, as these crises and these stressful moments and those days when you're just going, I can't believe no one ever told me we had to do this, that, or the other, then right now start keeping track of those. If you're home and you don't have a lot going on, if your business is slower, you can now just start talking. Before, OneNote lets you have different folders, different notebooks, and you can have different tabs in there. The nice thing is that you can pull things from your email and attach that. You can also do links to documents and things like that as well. So I like using OneNote just because to me it's a little bit easier to track, but honestly, if it's going to overwhelm, you don't want to use OneNote and you can use a Microsoft Word document, just start. Every time you get mad that you don't know how to do something or someone's not telling, doing that, just start tracking those in one place. The other thing that's nice about OneNote is that it is free with the Office suite, so it's not something that you have to spend $1 million on. The other thing I use a lot is I use something called Fastone. If you're running into documenting later, which I'll talk about in a minute, Zubin actually recommended this to me, I think. Zubin, right? Is this what you recommended? Thumbs up, I think you did. Yeah. So Zubin recommended this to me quite a while ago, and I put off getting it, and then now that I have it, I never looked back. What I like about this is that the screen capture is really easy. It does different tabs, and you can very easily annotate it. So if you are writing down how to do something, you can come back later and add little blurbs and, stuff onto there. So you can add things onto there. So I used that when I wrote a couple of GP manuals. I used this tool for every single image inside of that book. So it works really well, and it's $20 for a lifetime, so it's super cheap. The other thing is that OneNote does have the option inside of Outlook to just add things right into OneNote, so that if you are getting these critical, how come nobody told me we had to do this kind of email and you don't want to think about it, you could just add it into your notebook, into crisis management for later kind of things. Inside of OneNote, there is help and training built in. Under the help, there's a show training, which is really handy. I talked about the Fastone capture as well. And this is what you can do later. So basically, during the crisis, if you keep a list of those frustrations, if you can't connect, if you don't know how to do this, that, or the other, or like different things that Mariano brought out or Belinda brought out, we can't connect, or we're not able to approve batches. Those are really cool things to even document and talk to your partner about, can we improve those? The other thing is just writing down how to do them. When I do training or support sessions, a lot of my customers nowadays ask for those to be recorded. I don't have any problem with that, so I record them and give them a link to those training sessions. Make sure I'm not saying anything confidential on there, but if they can share them securely, that's a great way to do that. Other thing is to cross-train your team. If only one person knows how to do a critical process, and something like this happens and that person can't work, they're not able, they have to take time off during these kind of things, then you'll want to make sure and have someone else be able to do that. So those are my couple things, and I had some pop-ups in the chat. So there's a couple things popping up. Okay, from Zubin. He's just telling different things to use. And so Zubin had questions, and maybe I'll unmute and talk. He'll talk about a couple of things. But yeah, I just think that if use the time now. So if you use the time now to keep track of it, don't stress yourself out about doing anything other than tracking your stress and the things that you don't know how to do. Then later come back to those. That'll give you something to do when things are calmer and things that you can talk to your partner about improving.
Thank you, Amber. So Zubin, we're going to head back to you. We see you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. Can you share your machine?
Great. Hopefully. Right as I was about to go live, it decided that it didn't like me and the entire thing proposed, so sorry about that. Trying to click on the participants. And I'm trying to apply presenter. I'm been authorized as a presenter, and now I should be able to display 1, 2, or 3. We'll have to find out which one I get. Are you looking at a RDP session 104.42?
No.
No.
No, we see you. Did you share? You share the right monitor?
Nope. Obviously not. I see a full screen of Belinda right now with me as a little pop-up.
I hear the weird tapping noise too, Amber.
Oh, come on.
And while you're connecting, so I've been having a side chat with Jack on the line talking about like he has HIPAA issues. Yeah, that's one of the reasons why you want to look for one of those certified hosting partners if you do that, because they're going to, you will not have that compliancy will match your HIPAA compliancy. So we see your machine now. Yep.
All right. So we have seen a lot of interesting things with our customers as of lately. We've seen them struggling to try to get into their networks, have issues with limited bandwidth, with poor VPN connections, with limited VPN connections, all sorts of things going on. So similar to some of the things that Mariano and Belinda had both spoken about. Sorry. We've been trying to figure out how to get our customers alternative access to mission-critical systems. So similar to what Mariana was talking about is that you may just have a subset of functionality. You may not necessarily need access to all of GP. So when in our space in dynamic budgets, we're working with budgeting and financial reporting. So what we've done with our customers, we scrambled and put together a solution, re-architected our product to be able to work from the Azure cloud instead of from the on-premise databases. So what you see here is just an RDP session to a virtual machine up in Azure. Just imagine this is your on-premise SQL server. I've got Dynamics and I've got a bunch of company databases over here. What if it's really congested and really slow and really painful to get into your corporate network, but you need to run financial reports, you need to update your budget, update your forecast, and get a new cash flow? So what if you had the opportunity to export this data up to the Azure cloud? You can spin up a virtual machine. What we ended up doing was actually taking core mission critical tables out of GP. We only needed to interact with about 20 tables. So what we did was we took our dynamic budgets database, which had our proprietary tables, but what we did was we copied company data, GL 100, 105, our chart of accounts, 10110, 10111, our account summary balances, the 20,000 and 30,000 tables for the transaction details. We copied those mission critical tables up to a single database up in the Azure cloud. So we've got company 1, company 2 is OC, company 3 or TWO company. We've got 3 companies embedded into here, and I've got a chat message coming across. Inside of a helicopter. Am I really bad audio here? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we hear you fine. There's just in the background a little ticking.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you have bad noise in the background.
But
Alrighty. It's
that's
probably,
okay. Go ahead.
yeah, I apologize for that. I have a nice high quality headset, but it is Bluetooth and was set up for phone line systems, and I wasn't expecting to go computer audio only today, so sorry about that. Yeah, this is the headset that I wanted to be using, my Blue Parrot, and I'm on my 5-year-old H100 from Logitech, unfortunately. So, all right. What we have here is the different sets of data from the on-prem server, and I wanted to get this up to an Azure cloud. So what we've done is actually used Azure Data Factory, and we were scrambling, looked at the Azure Copy Data tool, synchronization tool, Azure Data Studio, looking at all sorts of different ways to try to do this easily. And we wanted to be able to put something in place where we basically just got a gateway application running on a server inside the customer's network, and then be able to quickly and easily copy and replicate this data up to the cloud. So if you haven't seen Azure Data Factory before, you've got this concept of a pipeline. And what you can do is create these pipelines, basically instruction sets, that say go run certain actions. So this is looking up a listing of my companies from the destination server. We just programmed it and said, okay, I want to, out of my 10 different companies, I just want to pull these 3 companies. And then for the summaries, how many years of historical balances do I want to bring over? How many years of live transactions do I want to bring over? How many years of budgets might I want to bring over? And what we did was we spawned some child processes. Execute the child pipeline for active transactions, execute the child pipeline for historical transactions. And if we look at the child transactions, what we did was we had it dynamically look up a set of tables. Out of all the possible tables that are in GP that we might be concerned about, analytical, fixed assets, GL, etc., of these theoretical 30 tables that might exist, just select a list of the ones that are present in the system. So each of our companies may have different configurations for GP, so just bring back what's relevant for what we want. Now, this is a little bit more advanced, but long story short, it brings up a listing of tables, and then for each one of those tables, it's going to go look up the last transaction that we synced to the cloud, get the last max dex row ID from the cloud, and then go back to the on-prem server and fetch all the transactions where the max dex row ID is greater than the last one we sent up to the cloud. So just basically doing incremental data sets up there. Interesting about this is that when we sync to the cloud, we could either just add the new transactions up here, or we could pass a pre-copy script like a truncate table. So you could basically do a dump and replace of your data set. Instead of incrementally adding new, we could replace the entire data set. So long story short, we run through, and this for each routine goes through, grabs the data set, transfers and copies it for each one of the tables that we wanted it to run through. I don't have to explicitly list them. When we first started looking at this, we looked at mapping. We actually had to map one table at a time and go through and map all the fields that we wanted to do. This will automatically copy all the data if you're creating a new schema. So we went from company two.dbo.gl.gl00100. We wanted to prefix that with the schema. It automatically created a new schema for us if the company did not yet exist. So it's got some really interesting intelligence in here. When you create the new companies or the new tables, if the table does not yet exist, it will auto-create a table for you. So you can set this pipeline up to not only be your first initial lift and load, but you can also have this as the ongoing runtime. So if your destination database does not yet have any of the data that you're trying to copy up to the cloud, it will automatically create it for you. A lot of these steps that we are struggling with, how in the world would we do this, set it up dynamically for a whole bunch of different company databases? All these routines are built into Azure Data Factory directly, which was really nice. So we run through a routine for historical transactions, and with the history transaction, we're actually passing over variables to bring back and filter and only bring back the transactions, look up the transactions which are greater than X year. And long story short is that we can run this thing manually, but then I finally was able to embrace Belinda's style of the world. And you see my little flick button over here? So I've got this
Mariano's style. That's another thing I stole from Mariano.
So I set up a Microsoft Flow, or Power Automate Flow. So over here, I click a button, and it's going to refresh my Azure cloud. What it is set to do is to go ahead and go through, sorry, get back over here. It will, when I click my button, it runs the pipeline and then sends me an email notification that it's been run. So what I'm trying to do next is get confirmation that it actually ran successfully and try to get some details back. But imagine that you've got this set up to run on a weekly basis or monthly basis, and then all of a sudden you did something for pushing through some adjustment transactions to the prior month and need to reset your data set. You could actually just click a button and do this on demand. So interesting is that, again, we were kind of, because of coronavirus, we were forced to get a little bit more creative, that the on-premise systems were too clogged. How could we jump around and do something a little bit differently? Now, how much does all this cost? A traditional GP system is a multiple database system. You've got Dynamics and you've got a separate company database for each GP company. By creating a single data warehouse, we are able to embrace what's called an Azure SQL database. Instead of spinning up a virtual machine with SQL Server and all your multiple databases in the cloud, you can actually run a single standalone database for far, far cheaper. This example, we've got a live customer going on this database, and it's costing us $30 a month. You've got the ability to change the processing units, basically increase the computing power of a single standalone database. You can increase the memory allocations on these things. If I were to increase the capacity from 20 DTUs to 50 DTUs, it jumps to $75 a month instead of $30 a month. If you dropped all the way down to 10, it goes down to $15 a month. The next step down is you can start one off non-mission critical, just kind of demo database for $5 a month. Much, much, much cheaper than spinning up a full VM. We are looking at hundreds, if not early thousands of dollars for a full VM. But these standalone databases are much cheaper. If you haven't looked at the configuration of one of these lately, it's pretty interesting that if we come back here, get out of here, when you set up one of these standalone databases, you have the ability to change the pricing tiers. And the pricing tiers start off with basic, that's kind of like the $5 version. Standard gives you a little bit more control, a little bit more expensive. But they've introduced the concept of a serverless VM. And if you come over here to serverless, I don't want to mess with this one, though. Flip over to another one I've got. The serverless databases can be set up with an auto pause and auto scaling or auto tuning. So basically, this is set to automatically scale and allocate up to 12 virtual cores, up to 36 gigs of memory, and that is computed on a per second basis. So for every second that it runs under demand, it could spike to 12 cores and 36 gigs max. And then once that process is released, it will drop back down to the minimum utilization, which I've got set to 1.5 cores. My storage is relatively negligible. The compute cost is done per second. We've run this for maybe about 2 hours, and I think we came up with like a $3 charge for so far. This will auto pause after 1 hour of inactivity. So if you're only working from 9 to 5, or maybe someone's coming in and tapping the database and works on it from 10 to 3, at 4 o'clock it will automatically turn itself off and stop charging you. 0 charge for the off use hours. So it's all set to kind of do this all on its own. So we're trying this out with one customer. We've done some early estimates of basically 8 hours a day, 5 days a week for a month charge. We're expecting somewhere in the neighborhood, probably about $100 to $300. It just depends upon the cores and how much we stress out the box. But we're estimating probably about $100 to $300 hosting a month.
So Zubin, you're using this for warehousing, right?
Correct. So for offloading, reporting, and or budgeting, sort of non-mission critical, non-transactional activity, or transactional activity which can be done like budgeting and then sync back to the cloud, back to the on-prem later.
At this point, I think what I'd like to do is, if you can, let me take up again. Let me introduce our guest, our guest person for the Q&A period, and then at that point, let's see.
Should be back to you.
Yeah, I got to figure out which machine is the right machine. And I don't want to do that. Well, meanwhile, while I'm doing this, trying to figure out where the heck I am, what do you guys see? I see Zubin. Is that what everybody else sees?
And I see you.
Okay. Oh, here we go. There we go. Okay. So, well, you know what? Let me just do the gallery view. See if everyone. So our guest speaker is our guest speaker for Q&A is Mr. Sean Dord. So,
hey everyone.
Hey Sean.
Hi, Sean.
How is
What's
everyone?
up, Sean?
Hey. What a great presentation everyone did. Loved it.
Yeah,
Awesome, thank you.
We just wanted to show a couple of different ideas. I actually have some questions myself. So one of them I'm going to ask based on what Zubin just showed to you, Mariano. So because you can't beat that pricing on the Azure Data Factory that he was showing. But how do you see that in relation? And maybe Sean, this is a question for you too, in terms of using the common data service as warehousing. Versus that.
So CDS would be very appropriate for, obviously, if you're doing anything Power Platform related. Microsoft wants you to use CDS as the storage repository. And in fact, I think ADF, Azure Data Factory, is the preferred mechanism for getting data from external sources, data sources into CDS. So I do see it as a viable option, an alternative, but it would be more of an option if you're trying to leverage Power Platform in general.
Yeah. Okay. And Sean, you've been working with that as well, because you've also been working with that, one of the other sister products of GP that uses it.
Yeah, I think Mariano hit it right. I mean, it's definitely designed for that. Microsoft data is the name of the game in this time of our lives, for sure, more than ever. So the more in the CDS, I think it's definitely a great repository, especially if you want to cross into those satellite and ancillary applications like Power Apps and Power Automate. Using the Azure SQL database option is a bit more, it's taking your data, making it a little bit more independent and isolated. There are a little bit of gaps that you need to fill in order to be as flexible to connect to your data. It would be a little less of a service like Power Apps is designed to be, for example, but folks are doing it. I mean, it is no secret that Dynamics GP is an excellent ERP system. It is no secret. It is also no secret that it is the only on-premises solution that Microsoft continues to support. And then lastly, it's also no secret that as consumers, we need it to be mobile. We want all of those things that we love about it from its infrastructure and architecture perspective, but we need it to be portable somehow. And that's not new. Folks have been offering GP in the cloud for years and years, whether it's through a Citrix type deployment or VM type scenario, but it's not as easy. You see the way that things that you can connect to other things through in a cloud service right now. It's simple single sign-on using your Azure Active Directory. Boom, you're there. So we're trying to take GP and get it to that spot. It's all possible. It just takes a little bit of finesse. Some of the examples shown here this afternoon are perfect for just that. So it's more of a, it's not new, which a lot of folks hearing this, they think it's new. GP in the cloud, it's not new. It's just the urgency behind it is maybe a little more in focus right now.
True, true. And so I'm going to ask this question of Amber, because this is based off of some of the stuff I was talking about. And you work a lot with consulting directly to customers. If someone in this particular circumstance right now, where we're all trying to work at home, if they decided they wanted to start using a hosting partner, whether it's their GP partner or whether it's just stored somewhere, or whether it's a specific GP partner, would you recommend that they go ahead and try to do it now while people are working from home, or would you say hold off, or what would you say to them?
Well, some people I think don't really have a choice. If they can't connect securely, they're in the position where if they can get someone can get them up and running and get them remote quickly. I mean, I think that person the decision is made for them. I think that they're in a situation where it's mission critical, and yeah, it's a terrible time to have to make that kind of a decision. But I think that I have a couple customers that are trying to go, I don't know if that's dinging for my computer, and if it is, I apologize. But in any case, I see the pros and cons of both. If you can do it right now and you have somebody that can successfully get you up and running remotely, that's great. But I think it's a complication that if you're working securely and can get through the crisis, I would hold off and do it when it isn't as big of a crisis, because you can calmer whatever prevail, and everything's going to be better I think. But like I said, there's certain people that their connection is so terrible, or their inability to get it working. That's a conversation to be had. I mean, do you guys agree that, I mean, it's kind of one of those, if they can wait a little bit, they might be able to figure it out, but then you don't want that to come to the back burner and hoping that things stay calm, so I guess that's kind of the thing. I don't like to add more complication in a already tumultuous, complicated situation if you don't have to. But if there is a way to get it up and running, and there are some partners that do the cloud versions of GP and the options that way, and they really are trying to make it as easy as possible. And if they can offer that, I think it's not a bad thing because they're good at it. I mean, but there's there's definitely things you have to check and make sure if you have any integrations, if those are going to work, if you have, third parties, are those going to work? It's not a simple thing to just, if you're not a vanilla plug and play, there's a lot of pieces to it that are going to have to get also up and running to make it work.
And that's a good point, because simply implementing web client within your own organization where you're hosting it at your office is not always a perfect at-home solution, because not everything works. Integration Manager, for example, doesn't work. Which financial tool you're using to report on may or may not work under that circumstance. So, Mariano, I have a question for you regarding your first regarding your timesheet, because I know you've been reworking it. That's one of the cool things about Power Apps is that because it is so low code, you can keep making it better and better without making yourself nuts. So you said that you have it writing to SharePoint online. Does it write any data directly into GP at any point, or?
You know, this is the eternal question of, do we write stuff directly to GP? No, I would never recommend anybody that that is out there to do any integration that write directly to GP tables. You have all sort of mechanisms as an alternative to that, where if you're using, for example, SharePoint as a repository, you can use things like Smart Connect and use SharePoint Web Services to get that data out of SharePoint into Dynamics GP using a proven tool, using proven interfaces. Worst come to worst, at least you should be using the base eConnect stored procedures to get your data into Dynamics GP. And I've done a few sessions of those at GP Tech showing how you can do that. But I would never recommend writing straight out of anything into GP tables, if that's how you were posing the question.
Well, it partly was, but I agree with that and I disagree with it. If it's a single table you're writing to and you're only changing a field, and you know that making that change is not going to adversely affect.
That's the big assumption, right?
Yes. Yeah, you have to know the database. Yeah, you have to know it. And that's true of everything inside of the Power Platform. If you're writing to it, is you have to know any data, doesn't matter what it is, you have to know your data. And so like approval is easy because we know we could just change 3 fields in one table and it will handle it in GP. So that's something that I find to be relatively simple to make a change, and I'm perfectly cool with Power Apps there. But I love the concept of customizing a solution for a particular role in something that's easy to roll out and easy to maintain and change. So those are some questions.
Yep.
Oh, and I had one more question for you. On your approval thing, you had, on my example, I stuck very specifically to payables transactions, but you had all kinds of transactions. Did you have different screens in your Power App that showed or that displayed the data? Like the general ledger screen, was that different than the screen for payables transaction, for example?
Yeah, I think these were all general ledger transactions. So, but you know, if you definitely want to get into a situation where you're grouping batches from all over the place to approve those, you can definitely, you know, create separate screens or use a componentized a component object in Power Apps where you can pass in the type of batch that you want to display, and the component will then filter out the data set for you. I mean, that is all doable. But in my particular case, I was just displaying GL batches.
Okay. Very good. I appreciate everyone. Amber had to step away, but I appreciate everybody chipping in and at least throwing some ideas out there and starting some some processing going on, the creation of ideas. Every now and then we need that. And so I hope everybody stays safe. I need all of you guys, so stay safe.
Yeah. Linda,
we stay there.
Well, then just one thing, doubling back on your comment, your question you had for Amber was getting access to the network. I see end users still making some very naive or poor decisions on how to run GP. Some people are actually trying to run the FAT client from their local laptop that they took home over a poor VPN or a low bandwidth connection to the office. Sometimes they don't realize that they have the remote servers. Like, well, should I be running this from the desktop icon, or should I run it from the remote machine that they got back in the company? It's like, from the remote machine. So sometimes there are some naive, poor choices that are being made because they don't really recognize or appreciate the understanding. So low-hanging fruit.
Yeah.
If you have a terminal server and you've got adequate capacity, teach your users to use it. If you need to reserve that for yourself because you've got to run payroll and you want other people out, so be it. But kind of compartmentalize them.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, and we'll end on that note. If you have a VPN already set up with your company, it is not advisable at all to run the GP desktop client from your local machine and connect to the server over the VPN. Use remote desktop connection or some other desktop connection to make that happen. It's great for moving files back and forth, but the bandwidth it takes to successfully run the data going back and forth, you're going to end up with a nightmare, and so much to the point that you're going to say it doesn't work. So it's certainly not advisable. All right, thank you everybody, and I hope that all of you got something out of this. It was good for us, and so it got me thinking about a couple things I want to get going on, and so as always, I always draw inspiration from these guys that were on the panel today. So thank you everybody, and stay safe.